Right, I'm going to show you how I do sew off the filtier and the Tampunto. This is the finished daffodil design, and that's what I'm going to be showing you how I'm sewing. This is what the pansy looks like with a different color in the background. Now, for the filtier, you need a fabric that is stiff, and I'm going to be using linen, and you can't starch linen because it ruins it. The starch gets into the fibers and rots them. So I'm trying this product called Terral Magic. Um, it's supposed to wash out, and I've never used this before, and it actually did work pretty well, except um, there's a few things I need to explain to you after I've used it. I found some problems. So I tried it on a sheer piece of fabric. Came out all right, but not great. So here I'm doing the linen. I'm doing what they said, is putting it in a bag and spraying the stuff in the bag, and that really didn't work very well. The linen is thick. It didn't get into it as much as I wanted. So I decided instead to, after letting it sit for a little while, I came back and what hadn't really gotten into the fabric. So I did it linen. Usually, before you iron it, you dampen it, and so I decided to treat it as if I were dampening it. So spread it out, sprayed it with this Magic. Um, you have to be careful. It's kind of sticky. If it gets on your hands, it does. But it does wash off. And if you look at the iron, you'll see it gets on the iron when you iron it. And so when in future, I would iron with maybe parchment paper between the iron and the fabric. So I sprayed it well. Now I'm going to fold it over just as I would have done if this was water I was putting on it instead of this spray stabilizer. And so I'm going to roll it up and put it in the bag and let it sit for about half an hour. Normally, when you dampen things, you let them sit for several hours, but I'm in a hurry, so I actually let it sit about a half an hour, maybe an hour, and I'm going to spray some more in the bag just to make sure there's plenty to absorb in there. That gives a chance for it to move into the other dry fibers, so that when you open it up, there's no dry spots. So here when I open it up, I did find a few dry spots. So I did, I just sprayed those. Um, Here I'm going to clean off my iron with just a damp cloth. It comes off easily enough, but I didn't want what was on the iron scorching and going into the wet linen. So I cleaned it first. As I say, in future, I think I'm going to use a piece of parchment paper between the iron and the fabric, and also parchment paper on the table, because that stuff did get into the fabric on the table. If I had replaced my cover, which I plan to do, that's an ironing board cover which has sort of a Teflon coating, and that would have been fine. But as you can see, I've got a nice big hole there where it wore out, so I need to replace that. So I'm going to iron it, and iron it the way you normally do linen. You don't iron linen dry. You iron it so that till it's cool to the touch, and it looks good. It's nice and flat and smooth, but it's not warm. If you iron it till it's warm or hot, you've scorched it. And it was very hard to get it to that point. Um, Again, it would grip onto the iron, but once it seemed to, like, once there was a coating on the iron, or once there was had gone over at least the fabric enough that there was a coating on the fabric, it didn't stick to the iron anymore. So it's like there at the corner, I've gotten it pressed well enough that it's no longer sticking, but the other end, which I haven't touched yet with the iron, is sticking. But once I get it pressed a little bit, it no longer sticks. Again, that's another reason why I think I'm going to use parchment paper. A press cloth wouldn't work because a press cloth would pull the liquid up into the dry fabric and would defeat its purpose or even stick to it. So I think parchment paper would work. And I found the dry spot in the middle, and I'm spraying it a little bit more, which will probably make it stick again. No, I didn't. As I say, once it gets a coating, it seems to iron much better. This is a wing needle, what a wing needle looks like. It's wider. It's almost like a very narrow, tiny knife blade. See, has a sharp point and it goes out at the sides. That's why it's called a wing needle, so that it will punch holes. And this here, I'm sewing the filtier section, and you can see the holes that it's punching. I tried to turn this is actually sideways to my sewing machine, but that's the way the camera filmed it, and I couldn't get it to turn backwards that it would fit in the that you could view it close enough. Now, once the filtier is done, now I'm putting a layer of backing on the back. I'm just going to float it on the back. So I'm just laying it down and I'm putting 2 layers of batting. It's very thin. And then on top of that, a layer of cutaway stabilizer. So on the very bottom, you see the fabric still in the hoop, then the 2 layers of batting, and then the layer of stabilizer, which is then turned over and sewn on. Now I've sewn that outside line, and I've cut around the edge of it. So you can see the filtier around the edge and the batting in the middle. It's hard to hold the camera and now this is the top side of it. You can see how puffy it is. And now I'm going to sew the background section, which should push down everything and just leave the raised flowers. So here's what the background sewn down. You can see that the flowers are high. The flowers are higher than the stems and leaves because, again, the stems and leaves are narrow. You can see that background gives it another dimension, and it gives it a nice texture. It pushes it down, pushes the background down enough. It's hard to see the filtier right here at the edge, but you'll see it better once the satin stitches around it. So I'm not going to show you doing the red work, but this is the finished design with the background and the filtier. And that's how you sew it. I told you this could be used for vestments, so I'm going to show you what it would look like using it for a vestment. So here I took an IHS, the design that I had used before. I'm just repeating it, and I'm taking it and I just these are just pictures. I I worked it like an applique. I sewed down some gold metallic fabric, uh, like where the I, the H, and the S are. And this is the gold metallic fabric sewn down and you cut around the outside of it. So it's you just the fabric on the it's a like a light gold fabric. So you have a metallic gold on top of a light gold fabric. And then um, on top of that, I used the fileteer stitch, but I used a regular needle instead of a wing needle. I tried another version with the wing needle, but I didn't like it. I originally tried punching holes in the lighter fabric so that the gold would show through, but it didn't show through enough. So here, what I did was because I have the gold fabric down, I'm going on top of it with a regular embroidery thread. This is a dark gold. It almost looks reddish on here, but it's really a dark gold on top of that bright light gold. And I'll show you some close-ups in a minute. Then once I have that down, I turned it over. This is it from an angle. You can see the shine of it going coming through the other thread. And then I turned it over, put my 2 layers of batting, my layer of stabilizer, which I'm just floating underneath it, and then sewing around the like just like Tampunto, sewing around each letter and the outside border so that it's all raised up high. Um, and actually, I think I just sewed the outside border because the letters gets once I'm going to sew the background in a minute, and that will push that down. So then I sewed the background motif, and that pushes everything down except what's underneath the letters. So now they have this raised effect, and this is what the finished piece looks like. It really turned out very nice. Here's a close up of what the background you can see on the left, and the on the right you can see the metallic fabric with the gold threads, the regular just embroidery threads going through it. And like red work, it has an outline of red, only this is a satin stitch instead of a line stitch. So those threads going through it, and I used the same um, I used the same motif as I would have used in the fileteer, but instead of using the wing needle, I used a regular needle. So I was putting threads on top of the fabric instead of punching holes through it. Um, so and again, this is the finished design, and I'm very happy with it. I liked how it turned out. So as you can see, you can take a number of different techniques and combine them and use them any way you want in embroidery.